The question is, if you clone a repository that is using NoteDB, do you get all of the metadata that was in your ReviewDB database? The naive answer is if you use git clone, you don't, because git clone, as you may know, only fetches refs heads and refs tags. But it does advertise the refs for NoteDB, and you could, in theory, clone them if you wanted, although we might make it we might try to hide those refs in most cases for performance reasons, but like the data is available for you to get with git fetch.
We got another question? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I get a question about topics. You were using topics as well. I was thinking about reverting a complete topic. Is that a feature that is working on?
That's not a 215 question, but it is a question that anybody here can answer if you know. I don't think we have any like plans to specifically do that. Yeah, I mean it's hard because like you can have merge conflicts for any subset of those changes, and like what happens if like some of them have conflicts and some of them don't. Hanwen, did you? Hanwen's not a maintainer. Do you? You were thinking about how to do reverts of large numbers of changes in large topics in the context of submodules? If not, then you don't have to answer.
I have no specific thoughts, except that the internal customer that uses topics the most is the Android team, and they want it to be faster. They don't generally revert. Like, I have never heard complaints about reverting things from the Android team.
Yeah. Sorry, we don't have a better answer, but we know that it's a hard problem anytime you like explode the number of repositories.
How is that revert relationship tracked? Is that something you specify in like the commit message that reverts?
Patrick, do you want to talk about that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question to Mike?
Yeah, how does the system know that there's the link between the original commit and the one that reverts it?
Oh, we just added a field in NoteDB that says revert off, and then that contains the change number of the change that it is reverting. And so we have a direct link between the two changes.
But I mean, how does the user flag, or is it auto-detected by the commit message, or does the user have
I'm sorry, yeah. So in the UI, there's a button that says revert. And if you use that, then we have a direct relationship between the two changes because we store it in NoteDB. If you choose to do that client-side on Git, then there is no way for us to really detect that this is a revert of like commit X, apart from maybe doing some magic, but we don't do that magic. So we really only detect it if you come from the UI.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because, I mean, firstly, you know, just typing git revert is a common use case, obviously,
yeah.
But you could have a situation where it's only a partial revert, but it would still be useful to have the relationship tracked.
Right. I mean, the relationship is tracked if you just do it in the UI. Basically, if you go to the change that you want to revert and hit the button.
Right, but if you only, like, if the commit that you're reverting has like 2 parts and you only want to revert one of them, then it would be useful to be able to track that.
What do you classify as 2 parts of a commit?
Well, 2 hunks.
Ah, okay. Well, in that case, just like create a revert on the UI and then like upload a patch set to that change that, you know, you modify the change in a way that only reverts the parts that you like.
Okay. I mean, yeah. One possible other approach might be to support recognizing it from the commit message, because you know you've got like, you know, authored by, signed off by, blah blah blah,
right.
And fixes bug, and then it could be reverts or something.
I think I mean it's totally doable, right? But it won't be 100% accurate, and so we didn't go for it as of now. But I'm not saying we have no plans, just no immediate plans.
I have a question about his revert off, because I have soil code about this. I think it's possible for if someone just revert a change that he doesn't revert a change from the UI, just because you in your code you just compare the commit, right?
No, the code does not compare.
You rebase
anything.
the revert change commit to the new.
You know, these are 2 separate features. So the one feature tracks the relationship between a change and the revert, which is the revert of field we store in NodeDB. And the other feature is a REST endpoint that is called pure revert. And you can execute it like on a change, and you give it a SHA-1 of any commit you like. And it would basically return a Boolean and say, this is a pure revert of that, or it is not a pure revert of that. And it just, on the Git level, compares that. But in your case, that wouldn't work because you only want to revert one hunk of like maybe multiple hunks in that commit. And so it's not a pure revert anymore because you changed the content. More questions?
We're seeing a lot of developments in the UI area with PolyGerrit, but we have to wait. We're using standard Gerrit. We have to wait till the next release to get all those lovely fixes for PolyGerrit. Is there any idea that you might have a more frequent release cycle to be able to pick up fast-moving areas of Gerrit, while of course at the same time ensuring that releases are stable? So at the moment the release cycle's fairly infrequent. With all that development work, could we do a faster release cycle?
I have some thoughts about this. One is that like we always talk about having a faster release cycle, and it turns out that like with the maintainers we have, who are a wonderful bunch of people, like we do it as quickly as we possibly can. We've joked before about like as soon as we finish a stable release, cutting a new release branch, and we've never done that. We have no like release manager on this open source project, so we just don't have somebody whose job it is to like be constantly stabilizing your release. That's just an excuse. That's why we don't do it. With regards to the UI specifically, maybe Logan can talk a little bit more about this, but what I sort of envision for the future is we're doing like really a lot of UX work right now because we've never had the benefit of like UX designers working on the project before. So I think actually in the future, like the 6 month to 1 year time frame, we're going to see a lot of like new stuff. But then I think there'll be a period of sort of stabilization. And once we're sort of stable, and what I mean by stable is that there's no like REST API changes that are going to be immediately picked up by the new UI, then I think we have the opportunity to decouple the UI and the backend a little bit. So I think that once we have reached this period of stabilization, we'll take a little closer look at like what it would take to release PolyGerrit separate, or release the Gerrit UI separately from Gerrit.
I wanted to give even a different feedback. So we are working with lots of large clients. In my experience, they typically skip releases. So they typically maybe go from 2.9 to 2.12 or 2.10 to 2.14 and so on. So my feedback is we are really fast in releasing software. If you think about it, we do 2 or 3 major releases where there are big changes. If you talk about and include as well all the patch releases, that sometimes the patches are really beefy. Sometimes there are even new features in patches. So we do a lot of releases. So my feedback is that large clients typically, they even will like less releases. And smaller clients, but maybe more agile, for instance, ourselves, we maintain Gerrit Hub.io. We do a lot of releases. We just release even the stuff that is not released yet, just because we noticed that the master branches, those guys, they need to keep it running for a quite large installation. It's typically pretty much stable. So we do release even the stuff that is not officially unstable, and very often it is even more stable than stable.
Yeah, I wish that more people were like Luca and could run Gerrit from master, because then you like, we don't spend as much time wrangling releases. Like if there are no releases, then my excuse about us not having a release manager doesn't mean anything.
So the question I was going to ask before I realized is probably stupid, but I have another one. Well, maybe it's not stupid. I was just wondering if in terms of the integration with various CI systems, and maybe this is going to be covered tomorrow, there would be the notion of only running CI if the SHA of the tree changes rather than of the commit. So if you just tweak a commit message, then it wouldn't trigger the CI.
Oh, maybe I can answer. So with regards to CI integration, maybe you're relating to Jenkins, that is the one that is mostly used. Yeah, there is going to be a complete new plugin that is going to manage that integration. And that plugin is going to be radically different from before. So with regards to changes to the commit message, is definitely something that this plugin can filter out. We'll just give you just an overview of what it does. So differently from before, instead of being just passive, or whatever happens on the Gerrit events is proactive. So basically, Gerrit talks to Jenkins and say, hold on, there is something new for you. And then Jenkins try to understand exactly what was changed and what makes sense to build. And because of that, I started working on the way to optimize this communication between Gerrit and Jenkins. Because the current way of communicating everything for clients with the large repos with a lot of refs is going to be really, really slow. So there's going to be a handshake between the two. And this handshake, this plugin can make some clever decisions, such as, for instance, one, as you mentioned, don't rebuild if you just added the commit message, even if sometimes people did explicitly because they wanted to retrigger a build, sorry. Or another one could be, listen, if there is something new about this change and you're actually building a patch set that is obsolete right now, just stop doing it. Yeah, imagine you have a change with 3 patch sets, and the build unfortunately takes maybe 40 minutes or 1 hour or 2 hours. So if the developer realizes really quickly that the patch set was wrong, is doing a new patch set, what's the value in keeping building the old one? So there are going to be a lot of new improvements. And the new design is focused in making Gerrit more friendly for CI systems. So the good news is that will not be just for Jenkins, but even for the other CI systems, such as Circus CI or even GitLab CI or any other CI you may have. Gerrit is going to be more friendly about how it communicates of what's new to build.
And is one of the things that it will be able to do, or maybe it can already and I'm just not aware, is for CI systems to do inline commenting?
Yeah, this is what, for instance, I showed briefly as well. I showed just in the commit message, but the robot comments that were shown before allows not just, let's say, robot code analysis, but even maybe robot CI system to say automatically, listen, this is what is wrong. Because the CI typically triggers some process. The process could be I don't know, a code lint and is saying that this code is not indented in the right way and so on. Already for the Gerrit CI, for the Gerrit project, when I started introducing, for instance, the specific jobs for the code style, they were the polygerrit guys, they wanted me, the code style, to be included. And then the backend guys say, hey, hold on, the polygerrit guys are not bad at all. That is going to be useful for the backend as well. They initially we were just extracting the list of files, they are not good enough. But they were starting asking, why don't you tell me exactly in the code where there is the mismatch in the alignment? So definitely yes. So the robot comment, as possibly they mentioned before, is not just a goodie that you get with NoDB, it's going to be a big feature, absolutely. I see lots of clients start using it. Yeah, go for it.
So currently, to answer your first question, if you're using the Gerrit trigger implementation, it does support some stuff that you ask for. Actually, you can exclude like trivial change. So it means like if you only change a commit message, don't rebuild on top. So if you pair this with sticky labels, like the label, if you copy the score, so basically if you configure your project to work like that, like let's say the verified flag will not like disappear if you do another patch that there's only commit message, and Jenkins Gerrit trigger will skip this if configured. But you need to make sure you configured both. But it does support this already.
I figured to fill some silence. I should have done this when we first. Do you have a question?
Just a couple of things about NoDB.
Yeah.
When can we get rid of ReviewDB?
When can you get rid of ReviewDB? Gerrit 3.0. I mean, we can't. In 3.1, we'll be able to delete all the code. The main thing is that in 3.0, you have to run an offline migration, meaning it knows how to read the data. There is like code in the Gerrit WAR that knows how to read ReviewDB, so we can't like rip that out and still have a migration tool. But in 3.1, we're gonna like, that code's gonna be gone. We're gonna remove our dependency on GUID ORM.
I just meant from an implementation perspective, how long do we need to keep the database
Oh, you're asking how long you should keep your database. Yeah, that's a good question. First, I want to say unequivocally, you should absolutely back up everything before migrating to NoteDB. Yeah, I hope those laughs are from all the seasoned system administrators in the room. I don't have an answer. Like, I think I actually have the answer that we're using, which is we had like some. And at Google, we have like, you can, for a given googlesource.com host, you can turn Gerrit on and off. And for all the hosts that turned Gerrit off, we did not migrate them to NoteDB, and we sent them an email that's like, we didn't migrate your code. It still exists. We're going to keep backups for 1 year, and if you don't come to us in that 1 year telling us you want to migrate your data to NoteDB, we're going to throw that away. So like we said 1 year, but storage is extremely cheap for us, so if you are concerned about, I don't know, like how big is a large Gerrit database? They're like tens of gigs, you know, that fits on a smartphone. So you can keep it forever, I guess. Oh, yeah. Once in 3.0, you can like take that offline. Like, I still recommend keeping a backup, but you can take it offline in 3.0. Would you want to say something, David? You're just looking at me. I just wanted to fill some time and say I should have done this at the beginning of the talk. We have like 8 new maintainers here since the last time we had a user summit. You may recognize some of us, but you probably don't recognize all of us. So unless anybody is too embarrassed, I'd just like to go down the line and say, hi, this is my name. Put a name to a face. You can like talk about what you work on, I guess, but I don't want to. Everybody has to think about that for a while, so I won't make you do it.
Hi, I'm Becky. I work on PolyGerrit out of San Francisco. And yeah, working on a lot of the new design stuff and some of the new PolyGerrit features you've seen, some of the robot comments. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Casper. I also work on PolyGerrit in San Francisco, and I'm working on inline edit right now. So yeah, that's coming soon.
I'm Dave. You've heard me talk. No, I actually like work in a different office than I did like 2 years ago. I work in Ann Arbor, which is a place that if you're not an American, you probably haven't heard of. You've been there. Yeah, there's a big like research university there that you may have heard of. So maybe you've heard of it.
I'm Luca. I work here with Gerrit Forge in London, and I would say that the best part of Gerrit that I've been working and continue to work on is the scripting plugins and the plugin infrastructure. That was my commit number 1, the plugin loader.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Edwin. I'm from Google, and I'm based in Munich. And in the past year, I was mainly working on moving accounts to NoteDB, and this is done now with the 2.15 release. And I'm now free to do more exciting features.
I'm Alice. I'm in the same team as Edwin. And I've been working on the improved diffs I just showed. And currently, I'm also working on migrating groups to NoteDB.
I'm David, working at Collabnet in Tokyo. I guess I've been the one doing most of the releases recently, so I should probably answer your question. Honestly, the release scheduling has been based around my schedule and based on when my employer needs the releases. So it's been kind of selfish. But also, I've been trying to make the releases so that they actually have complete features. If you go with a time-based release schedule, you end up with a release that's got half of the feature in. And we've had some cases where the features have taken longer than expected to finish, so that's why they've been delayed a bit. Maybe we should try and fix that in future. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I don't know.
Hi, my name is Hugo. I'm working for Ericsson. I'm based in Montreal, Canada. And our contribution for the Gerrit project is mostly bug fixing, scalability issues that we encountered at Ericsson. And me and my team worked on the high availability plugin. So that's maybe our biggest contribution, even though it's not in the core.
Hi, I'm Martin Fick. I work for Qualcomm in Boulder, Colorado. I'm the Gerrit 2.7 maintainer. I haven't done a lot of upstream stuff lately. Mostly I'm working on converting a lot of our fork to plugins so that we will be able to somehow get to 2.15 or 3.0. Well, okay, that might have been a little extreme, but so, and in that note on converting a lot of things to plugins, we've been in the last year contributing a lot of extensions to help plugins do more to master. So I have done some upstream contributions in the last year at least, so that helps. So a few more needed, but we're getting pretty close. Most of our stuff can probably be done in core now. Mainly the UI extensions need to get to PolyGerrit. So.
Hi, my name is Patrick. I work in Google's Munich office. The past year, I've spent most of my time on working on Chromium features to get Chromium on Gerrit, which led to smaller open source features like CCs, unregistered CCs. I spent some time on the load balancer that I talked about this morning, and right now I'm working on the permission backend refactoring and then getting us on a new permission backend.
I'm Wyatt. I work on PolyGerrit in San Francisco, and I guess I work on a lot of parts of PolyGerrit.
Hi, I'm Victor. I work in San Francisco office. I work on the PolyGerrit plugins mostly.
And I'm Logan. I also work on PolyGerrit with everyone in San Francisco. But actually, maybe the most significant thing I've worked on recently is the new work in progress workflow that is new in 2.15, and especially on working on email notifications and making sure they don't get sent out on work in progress changes, except when they should.
I have a question about NodeDB. I assume that NodeDB supports replication. So how do you make sure that the new Git repository that with the NodeDB is not conflicted between, if you have multiple servers, let's say users that log in, they create users on the local Git repository. So when they get synchronized, how do they not get conflicted?
How do you do that now with normal non-NodeDB replication?
Well,
Like you have a single master, right?
I have a single master, and then we have a single review DB, and all the different servers talk to the same review DB. But assume that if you're going to have NodeDB that's going to be replicated, there are going to be n number of copies of the NodeDB. And so when a user, let's say, logs in, the user gets registered and created on the local NodeDB. And so you cannot synchronize. I mean, how can you synchronize them? Would you have conflicts?
Yeah, so I mean, the basic answer is if you have a review DB and that review DB is you have several servers that are all accessing the same underlying database. If you want to get that same behavior with NodeDB, you have to have an NFS server or something where all the servers are accessing the same underlying Git repository.
I see.
But let's say from his point of view. So he was using ReviewDB and sharing a ReviewDB connection over the internet over a slow line was cheap, right? Whereas sharing the same NFS mount over a slow line is not cheap at all.
Well, so I guess I still don't have a picture in my head of where you're talking about multi-master or just replication, master-slave replication. Because with master-slave replication, you're talking to a slave, you can replicate the Git data out, and it's just read-only, so you don't have this conflict problem.
Right. No, we don't have the multi-master configuration. We have the master-slave. And so we have one single master and n number of slaves. And so distributed across different geographic locations, they talk to the master review DB to actually load any DB data.
Okay, so they have they're geographically distributed. They have a read-only view of ReviewDB that they get by reading ReviewDB. But then do they write to that ReviewDB too?
But they don't, because all the review code, there's only since there's only one master. When a commit comes in, all the reviews are done, and all the data updates is done on the master side that modifies the local DB. So right now, none of the remote servers talk to the don't write data to the master DB. They only read the data.
Yeah. So. Okay.
So basically, I think what Dave's trying to get at is your data is, read-only on those slaves. And so just by using NoteDB, there's no extra data really that you're going to be reading on those slaves than beforehand. The main thing slaves you read is ACL data. So they read what the project configs are to figure out who can access it and who can't. There's not much else other data that they're really reading.
So when the user logs in the first time, it will create a local register the user in the database.
But that's only on the master, right?
Well, right now we are forcing the users to log into master first, because otherwise the user doesn't exist.
Right.
And so we force them to log in. With the NodeDB, that's not going to be the case, because the user can log in, because it will automatically register the user on the slave in the local NodeDB.
No, we're not going to be writing to NodeDB from slaves.
Okay, I see. So there's a configuration that basically allows me to tell it, don't write to the NodeDB if you're a slave.
Well, slaves aren't going to be writing, period, right? I mean, that's the idea. Slaves are slaves, they're read-only.
Well, right now the configuration is actually controlled by the fact that we redirect all the writes to the master, and so. So
you have like a proxy.
Yes. So that's how we prevent the slave from writing to the master.
I mean, I think you can still do that.
Huh?
You can still do that.
Well, this is Gerrit writing to it. It's different. So the user that needs to write to the database, so the user that needs to write to the Git repositories. All the changes are redirected to the master. But now, if Gerrit is the one that's actually modifying and registering, creating the user in the NodeDB, there is no redirection, because it doesn't go through the proxy.
I mean, it could go through a proxy. Maybe we should talk about this afterwards. I think it would be like drawing a picture would help.
Yeah.
To see which requests go where and which database is in which place. Right. But I'm definitely interested in making sure replication works properly. I'll say one more thing about replication. This is general. I may or may not apply to your use case because I don't fully understand it. When the way that replication could work, I'm not claiming that it does work right now, between a master, which accepts writes, and a slave, which doesn't accept write, is you can just replicate all Git data from the master to the slaves. So the slaves will have some picture of these are the code objects in a repository, and here's the metadata that's in the repository. A slave can serve a read-only web UI only by reading that data and not by writing anything. And that's sort of the way. And you can do a similar thing today if you use master-slave database replication and turn off writes to the database in the slaves. But NodeDB is a slightly different model, because it's really just a read-only copy. It's not connected back to the original. Yeah, so maybe that will clear some things up, and we should talk afterwards.
I should be answering question, but I'm making a question now. Okay. So the question is, in version 2.14, there was kind of, it's not a bug, but it was not voluntary enablement of some of the NodeDB features on the slaves, and we were assuming that some of the accounts are already in the slaves, in the NodeDB, but they were not yet, so there was some kind of bumpy road there. And the main reason was that the slaves, they always relied on a permanent connection of the database to the master for fetching the authentication data, specifically, for instance, the SSH keys or the external IDs and so on. And that was fine, so didn't need any indexes. And so the slave, when they were starting up, they were not even registering the JUICE injection for the indexes. So with NodeDB, that is going to be all different, because at the end of the day, you don't have a database. You have to rely on indexes for accessing the NodeDB. So even the local one in read-only, otherwise you're going to be super slow. So I did not capture any change in that direction on the master. So can anyone, maybe Edwin, you've been working on that? Or does anyone want to answer?
I can conjecture about how things might work eventually. Yeah, I mean, this is like making it clear that we have some replication slave setup things to fix before 3.0, and I'll shore up the 2.15 docs to say, like, talk to me if you want to do replication, which is not a very efficient way to replicate. So I think that you're right that NodeDB is going to require to have indexes in the slaves. You can, we have thought about this internally at Google for other reasons, that we would want to have replication or a hook that runs after replication that reindexes. So when you could basically have a more similar juice injection stack on the slaves that has a local copy of the Lucene index, say, and it only reindexes changes when it receives metadata updates to their metadata refs. And I think that that's like a nice thing about NodeDB, is that it can, in theory, just hook into the replication plugin. Just anytime you get a replication event, let's like update your state, and it's just all read only.
My question is, have we thought about the impact, the performance impact of NodeDB replication?
Can you explain how that will destroy your server?
Today, replication happens on uploads only. So that's a decent amount of patch sets in a day. NodeDB effectively says we're going to have a replication event for every single write to the database.
Yeah, but why is it expensive to process those?
Because replication is expensive, period. Even a no-op replication is expensive. If on my server, yeah, on my server, if I start replication on startup, it takes at least a half an hour to replicate to my primary tier sites.
I think we can optimize the ref advertisement if that's the main problem. Because I think that, like, when you're ref advertisement, it sucks. We can definitely optimize it. I have in mind a few hacks for like making it cheaper, and I hope that actually just fetching NodeDB data is cheap, because it's just like, you know, you have 10 commits that have no real data associated with them. So as long as you can just like do a fetch that only sends 1 kilobyte of data instead of sending like 5 megabytes and then 1 kilobyte, I hope that replication can be cheaper. Yeah, Martin asked if we're going to make that a requirement for 3.0, and I think yes. If you saw me take out my phone like a minute ago, I was writing that down.
Sorry, another question. So I should be sitting there. Can I sit there? So working with our clients, all the clients, they want to use slaves because they all work around the globe, because they've got, so basically they don't have traffic in the morning, and then in the evening they don't have traffic. Got traffic all the time, weekends, during the day, night, everything. So the problem is, lots of them, they want to do more with the slaves. They will say that our slaves, they don't do enough. For instance, they have to serve the GUI through the master, and it means a lot of latency from a HTTP perspective. So we did a lot of work around in serving some static assets, let's say on the edges, but that is not enough. So why don't we think about maybe dropping completely the idea of a slave? Because tomorrow they're going to be, hopefully, Martin, are you going to talk about multi-master tomorrow? Or give some idea? Single site, yeah, single site is fine. But so there will be tomorrow talks about multi-master. Today we've seen Patrick talking about multi-master. And if you think about master-slave, it's actually a multi-master where the slave is actually exactly like the master, but you just don't allow certain operations. And last year I was talking about how to do the zero downtime upgrade with Gerrit, and I started implementing a plugin that just put Gerrit as read-only. Why don't we drop completely the idea of a slave? We just introduce the ability to set a Gerrit completely read-only and just allow just Gerrit. It can be master or slave. You don't really care. You just define the ones on the edge as read-only, but I can do exactly the same thing as the master. That means serve with the GUI, getting events, everything. What do you think?
That was pretty much exactly what I had in mind when we were talking about making sure that slaves are read-only so that you don't get conflicting rights. I guess there's still like a slight difference between a master and a slave, because a slave is something that has to like knows to accept replication events from a master. Although, you know, that's like semantics, whether you want to like call that a slave or just like a flag that says like accept pushes to any refs from this user. Okay, we'll keep calling it a slave then. So Martin's saying that replication doesn't involve Gerrit at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, the only difference is the web UI. It'll have to be read-only. And we, like I said, for indexing purposes, we'll have to make sure there's a hook that tells Gerrit to reindex when necessary.
I have another idea. You can do exactly the trick that those guys are doing, and actually you pretend to be read-write by the read-only traffic you serve locally, and whenever you got something that does a write, just do a redirection on the other side.
The problem with that is latency. You don't know when you'll be able to see the result of your write. I mean, you can like put some hacks in the proxy to like wait 30 seconds after a write or something, but that gets into a little bit tougher situation. Yeah, this is all very interesting. Thank you, Luca. And thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Vic. Yes. I'm looking at the clock here, and it's like 5:28.
Yeah, and drinks are ready as well. So we can even stop here and go and have some beers. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.